All right, well, we've been experiencing some technical difficulties this morning, but we've got it all worked out. Everything is back to normal, and we have a full day planned today for you on the Nick Crawford program. First up, we're going to be going about the South Carolina debate, some things about Justice Scalia, the legacy that he left, and how intelligent he was. Then we will be moving on into a guest host, Avery Carter, talking about some different things today, as well as Obama's take on the media and the media's truth, and some things about Donald Trump where he says he is not owned by anybody, but we will be quickly diffusing that right now. And all of that starts right now.
You are listening to the Nick Crawford Show. Current, campus, common sense.
All right, well, like it's promised, we're first to be starting today talking about Scalia. Scalia was a Supreme Court justice. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan, one of the largest and most prominent conservative voices on the Supreme Court. Many people said that even if you disagreed with his politics and his opinions, that you always respected him as a man, as a justice, and a constitutional scholar. So we're going to start out today by some of his best quotes, just to remember him and everything that he gave to the Supreme Court. Some of my favorites are, he said that you think there ought to be a right to abortion? No problem. The Constitution says nothing about it. Create it the way most rights are created in a democratic society. Pass a law, and that law, unlike a constitutional right to an abortion created by a court, can compromise. He's being sarcastic with people is what he's doing there. He says, God has a very good use to us. One of the reasons God has been good to us is that we have done him honor. Talking about respecting God and what you do. God assumed from the beginning that the wise of the world would view Christians as fools, and not that he has been disappointed. If you have brought any message today, it is this: have the courage to stand your wisdom, regard it as stupidity. He's saying, be proud of being called stupid if you are standing for Christ and in Christ's values. Be fools for Christ and have the courage to suffer the contempt of the sophisticated world. Saying that it doesn't matter what the elites, what the educated, what academia thinks of you, because you know you're right in the end anyway. You can find all this. This will be published on the website later today. Many of his greatest quotes that just showing what kind of man he was. All right, well, we're going to be going into the debate, South Carolina debate. Oh, it was 2 nights ago, and I tell you what, I think this shows the decline in politics, that just how ugly that debate was. I have never seen, I mean, obviously I'm 19, and it's not like I've been in the political world for long, but I've probably been watching politics for 10 years now or so. How ugly that debate was. It was absolutely horrific. Obviously, starting, I would say, with my favorite, Donald Trump, leading the charge on that. But it was just absolutely awful. So some different things that we're going to talk about, some different topics, some different things that happened in the debate. One of them is Marco Rubio saying that saying that Ted Cruz supports legal status and work permits for illegal immigrants, which is just simply not true. And we're going to get into the facts of that later. But first on, we have some audio for you on that, just some different things that went on in the debate. And why don't we go ahead and just tackle the issue of Cruz allowing legal status head on with that.
I'd like to make a final point to those advocacy groups that are very engaged in this issue and rightly concerned about addressing our immigration system, and in particular about addressing the situation for the 11 million who are currently in the shadows. If this amendment is adopted to the current bill, the effect would be that those 11 million under this current bill would still be eligible for RPI status. They would still be eligible for legal status, and indeed under the terms of the bill, they would be eligible for LPR status as well, so that they are out of the shadows. which the proponents of this bill repeatedly point to as their principal objective, to provide a legal status for those who are here illegally to be out of the shadows. This amendment would allow that to happen. But what it would do is remove the pathway to citizenship so that there are real consequences that respect the rule of law and that treat legal immigrants with the fairness and respect they deserve. And a second point to those advocacy groups that are so passionately engaged. In my view, if this committee rejects this amendment, and I think everyone here views it as quite likely this committee will choose to reject this amendment, in my view, that decision will make it much, much more likely that this entire bill will fail in the House of Representatives. I don't want immigration reform to fail. I want immigration reform to pass. And so I would urge people of good faith on both sides of the aisle, if the objective is to pass common sense immigration reform that secures the borders, that improves legal immigration, and that allows those who are here illegally to come in out of the shadows, then we should look for areas of bipartisan agreement and compromise to come together. And this amendment, I believe, if this amendment were to pass, the chances of this bill passing into law would increase dramatically.
Okay, so what Ted Cruz is saying there is this is a hearing about a new immigration bill, and basically what he's done is he has put a poison pill in this bill. He has added in there of where he is cutting the pathway to citizenship for illegals. And he knows that if he puts that in that bill, the bill will not pass because the bill supports other things that he doesn't support. And from the beginning, he said, I will not vote for this bill. So he's just he's doing a legislative tactic on that. Marco Rubio, though, uses his words to say that he was originally for the bill, to say that he was for illegal immigrants having a pathway to citizenship. Well, that's just not so. Cruz said at the hearing that in his view, for foreign immigration reform to credibly fix the problem, border security should be toughened, legal immigration should be elevated, and there should be a pathway to citizenship for those who are here illegally. Cruz further said that if the path to citizenship were eliminated from the Senate plan, as he proposed, some 11 million residents living in the shadows would still be eligible for RPI status. Now, if you're not familiar with that, RPI status basically is a part of the bill, is a part of law, where it says that if you are here illegally, you should have no fear of being deported. So Cruz is doing two separate things here. One, he's trying to keep illegals that are here illegally from becoming citizens. He's also trying to stop the RPI status, where basically the government turns a blind eye, ignores that you're here, and promises that you will not be deported, which Marco Rubio says is him supporting illegal immigration because he's trying to keep people from being afraid of being deported. Now, that's just simply not true. A Cruz spokesperson said that Cruz's amendment to remove the path to citizenship eliminates was a legislative tactic. You often introduce measures you hope will be poison pills if you're trying to kill a piece of legislation. And that's exactly what he did. But we're going to move on from that. We're going to go to the debate last night, where it was just absolutely ugly. And we have some audio on that as well about the debate. And first off, we just want to talk about this a little bit. That Donald Trump, I think, finally came unhinged last night. Donald Trump, I thought he was you're going to need blood pressure medicine or something. He was so angry. I don't understand it. I do to an extent, that Donald Trump is a 5-year-old. And that's what he does. Ted Cruz laid this out where he said that, you call out Donald on his stance on the facts, and Donald gets angry and starts to attack people, because that's exactly what he does. First off, we're going to go to Trump in Iraq. What he said about the Iraq war, as well as some later on what he said about George Bush. And his brother Jeb did not take too kindly to that statement.
And it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say. And he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, well, there's Trump, again, not owning up to something he said. Well, we're going to get in later on some interesting audio and quotes where Donald Trump seems to have a severe case of where he forgets everything he says, and then he says he didn't say that. Donald Trump said that you can call it whatever you want. You can say, it's impeachment, whatever you want. That's for others to decide. Where in his own words, he talks about Nancy Pelosi and says how much he loves the woman and says, quote, I was surprised that she didn't do more in terms of Bush and going after Bush. He also said it just seemed like she was going to really look to impeach Bush and get him out of office, which personally, this is what's important, I think would have been a wonderful thing. These are his own words. So Donald Trump in the debate says, oh, you can call it whatever you want to if that's what you want to say. Where in his own words, he said, yes, it would have been a wonderful thing to impeach President Bush. Again, remember, this is the 2016 Republican nominee for president. Also in October 15th of 2008, Trump declared that Nancy Pelosi, one of the most liberal people in Congress, just an absolute leader of the Democratic Party and progressive wing of the Democratic Party, declared that Pelosi absolutely should have impeached Bush for the war and flatly accused Bush of knowingly manipulating popular opinion. And then he said, well, when she first got in, was named Speaker, I met her, and I'm very impressed with her. I think she's a very impressive person. I like her a lot. This is a guy that's trying to claim to be conservative, but I guess you can decide on that one. He also said that he praised Saddam Hussein in the interview because he killed terrorists. I just don't understand how people are still on the bandwagon of Donald Trump. He also said George Bush was a horrible president and possibly the worst president in the history of the century, history of the country. Obviously, he's forgetting FDR, he's forgetting Woodrow Wilson, he's forgetting Jimmy Carter, and now Barack Obama, and possibly Queen Hillary later. Next up, we're going to go on to where Donald Trump is talking about 9/11. That's at the 3:55 mark, and so we're going to go ahead and go to that audio.
And he's had the gall to go after
the World Trade
mother.
Center came
he's
down
had
during
the gall
your brother's
to go after
reign.
my
Remember
mother.
that.
Hold on.
Let me finish. He's had the gall to...
Can we, just a second, can we get a replay of that one? He literally says, the World Trade Center came down under your brother's reign. Now, to me, that sounds something like, let's just hear it.
And he's had the gall to go after
The World
my
Trade
mother.
Center came
he's
down
had
during
the gall
your brother's
to go after
reign.
my
Remember
mother.
that.
Hold on.
Yeah, I heard that one right. The World Trade Center came down under your brother's reign. Let's not forget that Bill Clinton had 4 chances to take Osama bin Laden out and didn't, which led to Al-Qaeda becoming strong enough to even do this in the first place. But he's saying that this is George Bush's fault. Okay, that's fine. I don't think that was a completely good thing to say, especially since you consider that when in a previous debate, Ted Cruz brought up something about New York values, which everyone knows what he's talking about. The liberal elitist values that most people in New York have, electing people like Michael Bloomberg. But Donald Trump said that was offensive to New Yorkers because of what happened on 9/11. And that was the highlight of that debate, of how he stood up for New York and he was a champion for 9/11. And then a few debates later, when his poll numbers are down and he's trying to attack other people and be nasty as normal, he talks about how 9/11 was George Bush's fault. It's funny how he can flip-flop on that and making it into a positive thing and saying how strong Americans were to criticizing a president because it helped him politically. All right, we're going to go to our next clip now.
People here. Not only that, he proposed doubling the number of green cards. He proposed a 500% increase on guest workers. Now his position is different. Now he is a passionate opponent of all those things. So he either wasn't telling the truth then, or he isn't telling the truth now. But to argue he's a purist on immigration is just not true.
You know, the lines are very, very clear. Marco right now supports citizenship for 12 million people here illegally. I oppose citizenship. Marco stood on the debate stage and said that. But I would note, not only that, Marco has a long record when it comes to amnesty. In the state of Florida, as Speaker of the House, he supported in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. In addition to that, Marco went on Univision in Spanish and said he would not rescind President Obama's illegal executive amnesty on his first day in office. I have promised to rescind every single illegal executive action, including that one.
Well, first of all, I don't know how he knows what I said on Univision because he doesn't speak Spanish. And second of all, the other point that I would make...
Marco, si quieres, díselo ahora mismo, díselo ahora. En español, si quieres.
Not a complete lie on that.
I have no idea. People just don't like Ted Cruz. I mean, that's the only thing you can say about it.
I don't see how that even is possible. That how is it that he can say he doesn't speak Spanish, so how does he understand what he's saying? Side note, can he not hire a translator? Can you not plug that in Google Translate and see what he meant to say? But secondly, saying he can't speak Spanish, goes on about how he lies, and then while Cruz is yelling at him in Spanish. Is a debate moderator? That's when I say, hold on. He just answered you in Spanish. Look what's going on here. I don't understand.
But the debate moderators are there they're appointed by the GOP establishment, and they don't like Ted Cruz very much.
I understand, but it's for the American people. How did we not, or how did they not look at, let's just stop. How did they not look at this? Doesn't matter what candidate they're supporting. And look at this and see the truth being flung at them right then. And still say the talking points, still tote the party line, still are against this guy when it's right there in front of him. Obviously, he's not lying. He knows what he said because he yelled at him back in Spanish. And when I looked at it yesterday, he said something like, why don't you tell them in Spanish, man, or something like that. I forgot what it was exactly. But basically, he was telling him, okay, so why don't you tell them the truth in Spanish then if I can't speak Spanish?
So just a side note, that means that 3 of the candidates on stage can speak Spanish?
Right.
Jeb Bush, I heard him personally speak Spanish when he was here in Knoxville. And Ted Cruz, that was the first time I've heard him speak Spanish. And obviously Marco Rubio can. So I think they're really connecting with the Hispanic voters. But here's the bigger thing in all of this. Who cares?
Right.
Who really cares? Who honestly sits there and says to themselves, well, I'm going to vote for whichever one of these guys is stricter on immigration? Who, unless you're a racist, why do you care? I mean, I can see why you don't want 12 million illegals getting citizenship because then they can vote. But if they get legal status, who cares?
All this was a deflect by Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz called him out on his policies, called him out on his lies, called him out on an actual policy thing, just like for Donald Trump, and he deflected with something that he thought would be a good soundbite. That's all this was.
So, if any of you are interested in facts then you might want to go to freedomworks.com and look up Ted Cruz's scorecard as far as conservatism is concerned, and then look up Marco Rubio's scorecard as far as conservatism is concerned.
Exactly.
If any of you actually care about facts, which obviously you don't, because if you did, then Donald Trump wouldn't be leading the GOP primary right now, especially in South Carolina.
Absolutely. That is so completely true. It perfectly says all. I mean, I don't know. I can't add anything to that. You got to look it up. It's a great website, great organization.
And if you don't trust FreedomWorks and you're a conservative, then are you really a conservative? Because look at their mission statement.
Right.
I mean, their mission statement is to inform the public and to inspire the grassroots. And if you're not a grassroots conservative, then why are you even voting in the GOP primary in the first place?
Absolutely. All right. Well, now hopefully on a happier note, or at least a different note. I don't know if exactly going to be happy, but we have one of our guest contributors on the show today, Avery Carter out of Liberty University. Avery Carter is originally from South Carolina, and he's a diehard Clemson fan. We're not going to exactly hold him against that, anything against him on that. But Avery, he's preached sermons before. He is very active in his faith life, and he says personally that Jesus has called me out of the bondage of sin and ultimately saved me from eternal life, and that's why he wants to live every day for him. He knows what he's talking about, and we're going to have him on the show to talk about exactly some different issues, including Syria and some things that are going on with that. So we're going to have Avery on the show to talk about that, and we're calling him into the show right now to talk about Syria, to talk about the debate, and just how religion plays a role in all of this. So Avery Carter now on the program with us.
Good to hear you.
Hey, Avery, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Great. So I know we talked about some different things beforehand that we want to talk about. You can just take this however you want to go. What do you want to start with first?
Well, I was just listening, tuned in about 15 minutes ago to your show and was listening to what you guys were talking about the debate a couple nights ago. And I had a couple thoughts on the debate as well. With today being President's Day, obviously the election is in the forefront of everybody's mind. But with the debate the other day, I heard a lot of talk about the past and not much talk about the future, especially with regards to foreign policies. I heard, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, they were all just going back and forth with each other about what this guy supported in the past and now he supports something else. But I think the key issue at hand is what do the candidates stand for now? And being from South Carolina, I've got an interesting perspective on the upcoming caucus tomorrow morning. At the center of culture in South Carolina, there's three things. There's religion, resilience, and respect. People in South Carolina care about their religion. And even though I think we have three candidates right now that are pretty strong in their faith, or at least claim to be, and that's Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, and Ted Cruz. And while we may not agree with all three of those men on everything, I think that all three of those guys care about empowering the poor, making the poor able to receive the help that they need. They stand up for life on the issues of abortion, and they're honest, truthful people for the most part, I think. And that's what the people in South Carolina are going to be looking for.
Yeah, I think that's great that you brought that into this. I would want to add Jeb Bush to that list of people that care about faith. I think he seems like he's a religious and very faithful man. I don't really agree with any of his policies, but he seems like a good guy. He seems like faith does play a big role. I
was very pleasantly surprised with how Jeb Bush handled himself in the debate the other night, especially with the attacks coming from Donald Trump. And I think that with this debate, this stage in the game right now, we've had two caucuses already. South Carolina's coming up tomorrow. The stresses of the campaign trail are starting to get to the candidate, and their true colors are starting to show. And that was evidenced with Donald Trump. He just continues being the crass, the not very soft-spoken individual that he is. Ben Carson continued to remain steady the way he was, I hate to see him fall off the polls early on. I like Ben Carson a good bit, and I think he's a great man, but I hate to see him fall off in the polls because I think he's an intelligent guy. But like I said, I was really pleasantly surprised with Jeb Bush and his responses the other night.
Okay, yeah. I agree with you on Ben Carson. I think Ben Carson, I like Ben. I think some of his foreign policy stuff could use a little shining, but I would definitely think he should be somebody. He is a voice that should be heard. I think he's a very intelligent man, a good man, knows what he's talking about. I don't question at all that I'm sure any decision he makes, he gets down on his knees and asks about it first, and really wants guidance on that. But I don't think he's in this going in spotlight, but I do think something that Ben Carson's doing wrong is staying in it for this long when I think it should be clear to him that he's not going to win this, and he should get behind a candidate, whoever that may be, that could really go all the way. Because if not, we're going to end up with Donald Trump, which I think anybody that, after watching last night's debate, which we're going to play a clip later about him, that a person that has any decent bone in their body, any Christian, any person with any kind of morality whatsoever, how on earth do they support Donald Trump after seeing how he completely just destroyed candidates last night in such a minuscule way? And I think Drew has something to add on that.
Yeah, I can tell you why people support Donald Trump, and the reason that people support Donald Trump is because the same reason that the liberal party support Bernie Sanders, and it's because most of them are not very educated that support Donald Trump. Most of them have hateful attitudes. They're not very educated. They don't like to think for themselves. They like somebody else to do all the thinking and then tell them what they should think. And that's the majority of the people who support Donald Trump. Now, I know some that are exceptions to that rule, but that's the majority of the people. And if you look at that, that is the reason why he's leading, is because he's been able to tap into the uneducated, not uneducated, but, like that they don't like to think for themselves. They like to be spoon-fed what they should think. And people who actually do their research and look at facts instead of, well, this guy sounds good and he's not politically correct and all this other stuff, and people who actually look at their facts and look at voting records and things like that, they can see that Donald Trump's just not the way to go. There are much more conservative, better Christian people on the stage.
Well, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that. With the South Carolina primary coming up tomorrow, last month when President Obama gave the State of the Union address, our Governor Nikki Haley, was selected to give the Republican Party's response to the State of the Union address. And I'm not sure if either of y'all watched that, but I thought Haley did a fantastic job with her response. She spoke eloquently, and she was uniting in how she spoke. When Donald Trump speaks, he divides people apart. When Nikki Haley spoke, she recognized that she disagreed with President Obama on a lot of his policies, but also gave proposed solutions for the problems at hand in the country, which is I think that's the mark of true leadership. And Nick, it was interesting. You drew a contrast between Donald Trump and Ben Carson, talking about Ben Carson's foreign policy. Ben Carson doesn't have the political experience that the other candidates do, but neither does Trump. He's been in the private sector.
That's true.
But what I think the difference between Ben Carson and Donald Trump is, every time you hear Donald Trump speak, he talks about, I did this, I did that, look at what I'm going to go do. When Carson speaks, you hear him talk about we the people. And I think a measure of Ben Carson's intelligence is that he realizes that he may have deficient knowledge on certain issues, but he can surround himself with leaders that know their subject. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense. I think Ben Carson would tap into those resources because he recognizes that he's not the expert. Donald Trump, on the other hand, I think he would just say, I, look at what I'm going to do, and we're going to go bomb the heck out of people.
Well, if you look at the debate last night, Donald Trump even had a question from the moderator asking, basically, how well do you respond to criticism? Can you have people in your circle that tell you, no, Donald, you're wrong? And I do completely agree with you in that I think Ben Carson can learn and can do just about anything he wants to. Because he knows where that power comes from, where that knowledge comes from, and he is humble enough to realize I need to learn so much more from other people instead of people sitting here and listening to me. And that is a sharp contrast between Donald Trump and Ben Carson. But Donald Trump, that's what I think is so dangerous about him. I don't think he listens to people. I think it is completely him. It is all about his ego. He knows best. And I think that is something very dangerous, a dangerous quality to have in a president, where against that, Ben Carson and the way he is humble, that really, I like that a lot about him. I really do. I just think that, we need somebody that knows now. What is their stance on that now? Why I said that I think Ben Carson would be great on someone's campaign or, great working somewhere, because I think he does have the wisdom to make something move forward. But just needing to know something about that now is the issue.
Yeah, and I can attest to this from.
For that.
What do you say, Avery?
No, I said I think there's something to be said for that. Like, we need to have a president that is well knowledgeable on these subjects. And Ben Carson, if he was to get a different position in politics, perhaps I've heard people mention that he may make a great Surgeon General or something like that.
Which he said he wouldn't do that.
He said he wouldn't do that?
It might have changed by now, but originally he said he would not be Surgeon General. And that might have been just under Obama. It might not have been for future presidents, but he did say something about that before.
Well, I hadn't heard that anywhere. But I think that if he got a job working somewhere else in the political scene and then ran again, he may have a little bit better chance.
I agree.
Yeah, I just think that you can look at it from a business perspective. And obviously Donald Trump is the businessman, and
not that good of one if you look at his record, but
maybe not that good of one. That may be true. I mean, I'm not sitting here trying to dispute Donald Trump's business record. I mean, that's not what I'm here for. But I think that if you look at people who are giants in business, people who are worth more than Donald Trump is, they will tell you, and Donald Trump knows this. I mean, he's not dumb. He's a smart guy. He knows this, and he knows how powerful humility and knowledge can be when they're combined. And he knows that, and that's why him and Ben Carson have a little buddy thing going. They like each other because Donald knows that Ben Carson is the kind of guy who's going to surround himself with people who are smarter than he is on certain subjects. And that's how you succeed in the business world. When you hit a wall in the business world, you have to go out and hire people and look for people that are smarter than you and know more than you. That's how you get ahead when it comes to business. And politics, and when being the president, is kind of the same thing. You have to have people that have their specialties in their areas of knowledge, and you have to be able to draw on their reserve of knowledge when you get into a position where you don't know what to do. And I just don't think that Donald Trump, because of his attitude and because of his arrogance, would be able to do that in a situation where it would be needed.
Right. I mean, if you look at even just his Atlantic City hotel, the company was not going to be able to secure loans, and so Donald Trump came in and said he wanted to own it, and because he's Donald Trump, he can get the best loans at the best rates, and the company said, okay, that's fine, or the city or whoever it was that was giving that property to him said, okay, but we don't want you to get junk bonds with this. We don't want junk bonds because we already have a credit issue here. And he says, I won't get junk bonds. And then what's he do? He goes out and gets junk bonds because he realized his name is not good enough to secure what he needed, which goes again into his personality. That it's just showing that he thinks he can do anything he wants to. But we also had you on here today to talk about Syria and the refugee crisis is going on. And we want to make sure we can get you in before time constraints, before we got to move on to the next thing. So what exactly is your take about what's going on in Syria?
Well, Nick, one thing that impressed me about Jeb Bush last night is when he said that he was questioned. They asked him, if we knock out ISIS and Assad in Syria, would that pit Russia against us with Putin's backing of Assad? And Bush's answer said, well, yeah, we have to find a balance between strength and diplomacy. And I think a good leader is going to do that. I don't know what that specific solution is. That's up to the professionals to decide. Ultimately, I can't control what they do in that situation. However, as a Christian, I can control my response to what they do. My response should be to care for the orphans and the widows in their affliction. And Jesus said that how we treat the least of the people in this world is representative of how we view God. I can't control what the military is going to do to combat Assad or ISIS. And honestly, I don't think there's a quick fix or a cut and dry solution on this issue. But with Syrian refugees, I think it's the responsibility of the Christians and the church to care for those who can't care for themselves. So what that means pragmatically, practically for the average American citizen, is that those of us that have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action.
No, that's absolutely correct. Today, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with this crisis today, Christians are responsible to help alleviate the sufferings of others. Personally, right now I have friends that are on the ground working in refugee camps, and I've gotten to meet and work alongside some of these Muslim refugees that have escaped the horrors in Syria, and they're real people. These people that are fleeing for refuge are doing so because they've already been bombed the heck out of. And Donald Trump, as we were mentioning his policies, he just wants to go just drop bombs on everybody. And I've heard him say that. I listened to him speak when he came to campus here at Liberty University at the beginning of last month. But we as American, especially Christians, can't get so politically desensitized and just hear all these numbers of Syrian refugees that we forget that these are other humans. We can't ignore their suffering for a political agenda. It's horrific, it's un-American, and it's un-Christ-like. Now, I understand that not everybody tuning into this show right now holds the same faith I do. But I believe firmly that when non-Christian people see Christianity in the church, they should have the idea in their mind that those are the people that are going to help me out. They shouldn't be thinking, oh, those are those Christian hypocrites. They talk about loving their neighbor, but they don't. I think now with this Syrian refugee crisis, this is definitely a huge opportunity for Christians in the United States to show the love of Christ to the people of the world that don't know it. And I think that as the church, we need to do a better job of that.
Well, I do think you have a good point there about talking about Christians and how we're supposed to serve and how we're supposed how we should react out of love in this situation. I do think there are some things that need to be looked at. One, from the very beginning, I've said that before we take in just all Syrians, because when you look at the percentage of it, that an overwhelming majority of people from these nations that are trying to come here are 18 to 35-year-old males, and not women and children, where I agree that the women and children should be the ones cared for first, where in these European camps, women and children are being absolutely desecrated right now. They are being abused. They are being raped. There are these males that are coming into these camps that are recruiting other members for ISIS, that they are doing acts of terror in these camps. You can look at the news any day and see that. But one thing that I've called for from the very beginning was that there's a very simple test on to see, who we can help in this, and that no Christians are joining ISIS, just like no Jews were Nazis. That we can work with pastors, we can work with churches in these areas because they know, the good ones, the real solid ones, because they have a reputation. You can see they know who the real Christians are and which families are really hurting. That it's a very simple test of showing we should get these Christians out because the government's not doing it. Private organizations have, and it's been working. That they actually have been able to get Christians out of these areas because it's very simple that Christians are not joining ISIS. We should not be taking in just all these crazy, refugees that are not really even refugees. They're trying to get a free plane ticket to sovereign states where they can do terror. But I would say that I think it is easy to look at this as numbers and to see just people and not see people. But I do think you've got to look at this somewhat common sensely and see, some different things about it.
No,
but go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you. But like I said, that there's no cut and dry political solution. Just because, the civil war in Syria didn't involve us at first. And then by us involving ourselves, now there's a big conflict. Whether we originally started the conflict or not, we're involved in it now.
Well, and we were the ones that made it so much worse, that Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Kerry, that we have inserted ourselves into something that we should not have been in the first place, and that is a large reason why there is such a vacuum and why so many Muslim extremists have filled these vacuums, and the reason why things are going so poorly. I was not for the dictator that was there, but some would argue that at least a stable government where you know who your enemy is and you know the bad things that are going on is at least somewhat better than a complete free-for-all where all these militants are just completely controlling the area.
Right, and I think that makes it even all the more so the responsibility of the Christian church to go and minister to these people. As you were talking about, women and children in camps are being completely humiliated and they're stripped of their humanity. But these people have already endured so much that they're fleeing from conflict, and that they are desiring a life of peace. And I'm talking about the refugees that are fleeing from the Civil War right now, and understanding that there may very well be some bad apples in the bunch. Yeah. However, that makes it all the more the responsibility of the church to go and do what the Lord has called us to do, because God did not start the United States of America. God started the church, and therefore it's the responsibility of the church to go and share the news of Christ, and that is how ultimately peace is going to reign in this world.
All right, well, we've got to give you the last word on that one right there, because we've only got just a few more minutes left in the program. We're going to have to move on to the next thing. But it was a pleasure having you on the program today. We think you offer a lot of great insight, and we're going to have to make sure to have you back on soon.
I appreciate it, Nick. Right. God bless. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Avery. You too. All right, well, next on the program, we're going to be talking about some different things. One real quick is about Donald Trump. We've secured his financials. It's all public knowledge. But just a side note of where he talks about how everyone is always owned by their creditors, and talking about how Ted Cruz is owned by Goldman Sachs. Even though Ted Cruz took out a loan on the equity he had in Goldman Sachs, so he didn't have to take his money out. So technically he was sort of borrowing from himself and paid the full thing back. But Donald Trump has millions and millions of dollars from people like Ladder Capital, Capital One, the Bank of New York, Investor Savings Bank, Amboy Bank. I could go on and on and on, of millions upon millions, some over $50 million, which could be up to billions of dollars, that he has not paid back, that he has in loans from companies. So just a thing there, that if you're wanting to say you're owned by people you own money to, that you owe money to, it looks like Donald Trump has many kings that he owes money to. But we're going to go ahead and move on to, we've only got a few minutes, but for something that's going on at UT right now, on some assaults, accusations, and we're going to have Hannah Claire fill us in on that.
Okay, so last Tuesday, 6 women came forward and with a lawsuit accusing the University of Tennessee, all the way back to 1996, of harboring a dangerous sexual culture and also acting indifferently towards sexual allegations that have come forward. These charges include a scandal with Peyton Manning that was very public back in 96, but hasn't really been talked about recently. And the allegations is from an athletic trainer stating that Manning exposed himself, and she filed a lawsuit against Manning personally, but that was settled out of court. She ended up having to leave the university. That was a part of the settlement.
Because didn't that one end where the story on that one actually ended up being basically he was in the locker room, and like he was just, you're in a male locker room, and I don't really remember the story exactly, but somehow he just pulled his pants down or something. I don't really remember exactly what happened, but it wasn't even...
She was checking him for an injury, and he said that he was mooning himself to another player.
Right.
But the other player said that that's not what Manning was doing. I don't remember the player's name specifically, but
But either way, he was acquitted of all accusations.
There was never any police investigation.
Right.
And I think that's a part of the lawsuit itself, that the university looks at this sometimes as an internal issue when actually sexual allegations should often be taken to the police, but they aren't. And then, also looking at A.J. Johnson and Michael Williams and how they're going to go to court in the spring over some rape charges, and then also how Von Pearson was accused, but he was acquitted. Looking at how the university treats these things, I think personally, under Butch Jones, that the university has handled these things very well. Butch Jones' policy is that if you are accused of sexual allegations, that you are immediately suspended from the team, regardless of if there is a criminal investigation. That accusations, in his opinion, allow for you to be removed from the team. And so I think that is a great policy. Von Pearson was allowed back onto the team, but A.J. Johnson and Michael Williams were not, as they are going to court in the spring. So,
all right. Well, thanks, Hannah Claire, on that one. Again, we only have a few minutes left in the program. We have one last thing we're going to want to get to today, and I think this is something very big that some people are saying that this could be a restraint on media, and it's where President Obama blames fractured media for lack of common basis for what's true. President Obama suggests that the U.S. needs a single media entity for truth during his address to the Illinois General Assembly this week. What he's basically saying is that there's so many different media outlets in America that how do Americans know what is actually true and what is the truth? Now, call me conspiracy theorist, but with this going on, to me, this sets off all the bells and whistles of a government-licensed practice for truth, that the government would start saying what is true, they would verify what is actually going on, and I have complete trust and faith in our government. I don't think they would ever do anything wrong. So don't get that from me. But to me, it sounds like some, not me, would say this could be a way government could censor free speech and censor news outlets they don't agree with, like Fox News, how they've already done that, or other outlets. But who knows? Obviously, the government never does anything like that.
And obviously, the government never says anything bad about MSNBC or CNN. And I would say that if the government was going to endorse a news provider, that it would be probably ABC, MSNBC, CNN, something one of those, because they honestly lean to the left on everything. They put a leftist spin on all of their news. They have an agenda when they bring the news to you. And if you watch CNN, you can tell. I mean, if you're educated enough, you can tell. Now, most of the people that watch CNN probably aren't that educated. And you know what? That's okay. But
we're going to put just a clause in right there. That stance is not supported by the program. That is an individual stance.
That is a stance of Andrew Adams. You can contact me if you feel differently.
Well, we're going to have to go on that one. So as always, thank you for listening to the Nick Crawford Show, and we'll be back here tomorrow, same time, 1 o'clock. You can visit us at nickcrawfordshow.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.
You are listening to the Nick Crawford Show. Current, campus, common sense.